Okay, so let's fill in some of this vocab. I went in and typed in some, so you didn't have to write it all today. So complementary angles, you probably know what that is. What is it? Two angles that add up to what? 90 degrees. Supplementary do what? Now, I used to have trouble memorizing which was which. Did I tell you how I do that? 90 is smaller than 180, right?
Yep.
C comes before S in the alphabet. That's how I remember. C comes before S, 90 is smaller than 180. So it's just a little trick to help you remember if you need it. All right, adjacent angles are two angles that share a common vertex and a ray. So they share a common vertex and they share a ray. So are these adjacent angles? Yes, they share a common vertex and they share a ray. Okay? Linear pair is a pair of adjacent, well, don't write too big. We got to write this, I wrote too big here. Adjacent, supplementary. Sorry. I should have made more room there. A pair of adjacent supplementary angles. They share a ray and add to 180 degrees. So would these two angles be considered a linear pair? They don't meet one requirement. Right, they don't add to 180. They are adjacent angles, but they're not a linear pair. They don't add to 180. You see the difference? This is a linear pair, this is not. Okay, but these are both adjacent angles. All right, vertical angles. Two angles whose sides form two pairs of opposite rays. So let's draw a picture of that. Two angles whose sides form two pairs of opposite rays. Well, I'm just going to draw opposite rays here, A, B, and C. Those are opposite rays, right? If I draw another line through here, and just call that D and E, I now have two pairs of opposite rays, right? All right. This is just a little extra thing. Complementary. Oh, that's a. Hold on. You're going to hear. So, hey, let's talk about vertical angles again a little bit more. This is a pair of vertical angles here. It's like two V's that come together. And they are, you learned before, they're what? Congruent. Yeah. And so this is also a pair of vertical angles right here. But they're a different size, so I'm going to use two lines for that. I know it's so distracting with them walking by, but they'll be done here in a second. All right, complementary and supplementary angles are usually adjacent. Usually. But they can be non-adjacent. They don't have to be next to each other to be considered complementary or supplementary. If they're complementary, they only have to do what? Add up to 90. They might not be adjacent necessarily, okay? In the figure, name a pair of complementary angles and a pair of supplementary angles and a pair of adjacent angles. So, complementary, I'm just going to abbreviate. Where's a pair of complementary angles? DJ.
Can they be from like either one?
Mm-hmm.
And like add together? Okay.
Right.
H and G and L and J.
Okay. So he's saying this angle right here, which is true, 75 plus 15 adds up to 90. So I'm going to say angle H, because I can name this one H, but I can't name this one J. I have to use all three letters, angle KLJ, or you could say JLK.
JL.
Yeah, well, the L has to be in the middle. Okay, because that's a vertex. All right, supplementary. So give me a pair of supplementary angles. Maeve.
Angle H,
Uh-huh.
angle KLM.
And angle KLM. Very good. Because they add to 180. 75 and 105. And then a pair of adjacent angles. Catherine.
KLM and JKL.
Yeah. There's just wording, you're just naming it wrong. What has to be in the middle?
JL.
The vertex has to be in the middle. Okay? So, adjacent are always next to each other, but supplementary and complementary don't have to be. Okie dokie? Given that angle 1 is a complement of angle 2, and the measure of angle 1 is 17 degrees, find the measure of angle 2. Well, if they're complement, they add together to what? 90. And I'm going to subtract angle 1, which is 17 degrees. And that equals what? So I would say the measure of angle 2 is equal to 73 degrees. Do you have to write all that? Probably not. Eventually you might. So if 3 and 4 are supplementary and 3 is 119 degrees, I would do 180 minus 119 because supplementary means 180 degrees. And that means 90 degrees. So then I would subtract, and the measure of angle 4 is equal to 61 degrees. Easy enough? All right, two roads intersect to form supplementary angles. Again, this is 180 degrees. So two roads intersect to form supplementary angles. Angle XYW and angle WYZ. Those are the supplementary angles. Find XYW and WYZ. So what do you do to set this up? Not both of them. These, what'd you say? Add them together and set it equal to 180. Yeah. This plus this. Yeah. Equals 180. Combine like terms, 2x and 4x gives me 6x. 14 take away 20 is minus 6 equals 180. And then I'm just going to tell you x is 31. Instead of going through that whole process, you find x, but you're not done yet. What do you have to do? Yep, 31 here and 31 here. And then I'll just tell you what the answers are. The measure of angle XYW equals 76 degrees. That's this one right here. And then the measure of angle WYZ equals 104 degrees. And you should check what? That they add to 180. Okay? All right. Identify all of the linear pairs and all of the vertical angles in the figure. Linear pairs have to add to what? 180, and they share a ray, right? Okay, so give me one set of linear pairs in here. Connor. They share a ray, and they add to 180.
Angle 2, angle 3.
Right on. Angle 2 and angle 3. And then there's one more pair. Who wants to give that to me? Maeve.
1 and 2.
Angle 1 and angle 2. Yes. Okay. And then vertical angles. So they kind of have to intersect each other, and remember they're going to have to form congruent angles. So take a look at that picture. Bella, can you give me a pair of vertical angles?
Angle 5 and angle 4.
Tricky. Not quite. They are kind of like opposite each other, if you remember our picture here. See the purple? Those are vertical angles, and then these are vertical angles. They sort of are, I would say, opposite each other. So how about try again, Bella?
4 and 1.
Okay, not quite. Those are not congruent because they don't form a V. They don't share opposite rays. See, here's a pair of opposite rays, and here's a pair of opposite rays. So 1 and 3, right on, okay? Angle 1 and angle 3. I know that vertical angles are tricky. It's easy to want to say that 4 and 2 are vertical angles, but they're not, okay? Because they don't make a pair of opposite rays. Do you see what I'm saying? An opposite rays are on a line, all right? 2 pairs of opposite rays. Let's just write that down again. And opposite rays are on a line. What else do we know about vertical angles? They are what?
Have the same.
Measure, right? So they're congruent. They are congruent. That's the only pair of vertical angles in there. All right, 2 angles form a linear pair. That means they are adjacent and add to 180. The measure of one angle is 3 times the measure of the other angle. Find the measure of each angle. So I'm going to draw myself a picture. Doesn't really matter how you make that angle. I just drew a linear pair. And then it says the measure of one angle is 3 times the measure of the other angle. Well, I don't know the other angle. That's got to be x. If that's x, then this one is going to be what? 3 times that. Let's just say 3 times that, which we would represent as what? 3x. Do you all see that? So then I can set up an equation as what? X. They add to what? 180. They add to 180. So x plus 3x equals 180. Because they're a linear pair, they add to 180. 4x equals 180. X equals 45. So I'm going to say that this one is 45 degrees. I don't have any letters in there, so I'm just going to draw it on the picture. If that's 45, how big is that? Does anybody know in their head? 135. You can do that in your head. If you multiply 3 times 40 and then 3 times 5 and add them together. 120 and 15. You can do that in your head. Okay? All right, so this is what I want you to do. Page 38. 2 through 7, 9, 13, 17 through 29. This is just really spread out. It's not as bad as it looks, I promise. (43) and 45. For 45, I wrote a little note here. Answer will be an expression. How many of you are using the odd answers in the back of the book? You should always be checking if you're at home, at least the odds for sure, okay? You can't do the evens, but